Go get them, President Trump. Reduce that spending. We're behind you 1,000%. Well, he has. He has. 0.1% he's asking us to reduce. And I'm not saying senators shouldn't ask questions and make some changes if they need to be made, but here's the bottom line. It is gut check time. It is gut check time.
Democrats were ready for another standard fight over spending, but John Kennedy flipped the entire debate with one simple question. If Washington keeps talking about cutting waste, why does everyone get uncomfortable the moment actual spending cuts appear on the table? And once he started breaking down where some of that money was going, the reaction inside the chamber became impossible to ignore.
I want to say, Mr. President, next week, President Trump's going to send us over what's called a rescission bill. What does that mean? Well, we've got a $7 trillion budget, okay? I don't know how much of that $7 trillion is waste, but every fair-minded person would have to agree that there's some money being spent in that $7 trillion that shouldn't be spent. It just shouldn't. It's wasted money. And so President Trump and this Congress made one of its objectives trying to reduce spending. Not spending that we need to reduce, but spending that needs to be reduced. I call it spending porn. And the president has sent us a bill. He's saying to Congress, I want you to reduce spending in the current budget by $9.1 billion. And let me tell you what the spending, what constitutes the spending I want to reduce. Well, first, $9.1 billion out of a $7 trillion budget, we're not talking about a lot of money here. We're talking about 0.1%. That's all. That's point one. Point two, you need to look at what the president's asking us to cut out. I'll just give you a couple of examples. I didn't make this up. The president is saying we're giving $3 million to Iraq to produce Sesame Street. Maybe we could use that money for something else. The president is saying we're giving $3 million to Zambia for circumcisions and vasectomies. The president's saying we don't need to do that. We've got other priorities. We're giving $500,000 to Rwanda to buy electric buses. The president is saying to us, Congress, we don't need to be spending the money on that. There are more important things. We're spending $67,000 to give insect powder to kids in Madagascar. I don't even know what insect powder is, but the president's asking us to cut it out. We're giving $3,600,000 to Haiti for pastry cooking classes, for cyber cafes, for dance focus groups, for male prostitutes. The president's saying, I don't think so. I don't think that the American people support giving their hard-earned money to male prostitutes in Haiti. So he's asking us to cut it out. He's asking us to reduce the budget by $833,000 because some of President Biden's bureaucrats gave a contract to transgender people, sex workers, and their clients in Nepal. The president's saying, I don't want to do that. And he's right. That's enough. You get the idea. That's why I call it spending porn. Triggers your gag reflex. You look at this stuff and you go, what in God's name? Who decided to do this? Well, Congress didn't. The bureaucrats did. It's money we appropriated, but we didn't tell them to go spend money, $833,000, and give to sex workers in Nepal. They just took the money we appropriated and used it for that. And so the president is asking us to do what's called a rescission, to cancel the spending. Now, I have listened. I've been here 8 years, Mr. President, and I've listened to a whole bunch of people talk about the need to reduce spending. But you got to watch what people do, not what they say, because talk is cheap. And around here, I've learned pretty quickly that reducing spending, it's like going to heaven. I want to go to heaven. I bet you want to go to heaven, Mr. President. I bet our guests in the gallery want to go to heaven. But everybody wants to go to heaven. Raise your hand if you're ready to take the trip today. Most people, you are, sir, and I admire that, but most people want to live a little longer. And that's the way it is with reducing spending around here. I want to reduce spending. I support it, but not just yet, because I've got this project. Well, and I've listened to that. And I've especially listened to it for the past 100 days. Go get them, President Trump. Reduce that spending. We're behind you 1,000%. Well, he has. He has. 0.1% he's asking us to reduce. And I'm not saying senators shouldn't ask questions and make some changes if they need to be made, but here's the bottom line. It is gut check time. It is gut check time. You either believe in reducing spending or you don't. And if you talk the game and say, let's reduce spending, and you vote against this bill, in my opinion, you ought to hide your head in a bag. Because you will be able to cut the hypocrisy with a knife. It's real, real hard, Mr. President, to preach temperance from a bar stool. It's gut check time. We need to pass this bill. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
The debate began around a proposed $9.1 billion spending cut tied to Donald Trump. While that figure is small compared to a $7 trillion federal budget, it became politically important because it forced lawmakers to take a concrete position on real spending reductions, rather than just speaking in general terms about fiscal responsibility. When John Kennedy took the floor, he shifted the focus away from abstract budget numbers and toward specific examples of federal spending. His argument wasn't built on slogans or ideology, but on the idea that budget debates only become meaningful when lawmakers are confronted with actual line items and have to decide what should stay and what should go. But this is where the discussion deepens. Once individual programs are placed under scrutiny, the argument stops being just about whether spending should be reduced in theory. It becomes about whether lawmakers are willing to defend every category of spending when it is exposed in detail and tied to real-world consequences. Kennedy then pointed to a familiar pattern in Washington: broad agreement on cutting waste, followed by hesitation the moment specific reductions are proposed. To illustrate that gap between principle and action, he used a comparison that stood out in the speech, saying it is like people saying they want to go to heaven, but not wanting to take the trip today. The point was not about religion, but about how support for an idea often collapses when it requires immediate commitment and real political cost. From there, the argument shifts into a question of consistency and accountability. Kennedy's broader message is that fiscal responsibility cannot exist only as a talking point. It has to be applied when decisions become uncomfortable, not just when they are easy to support publicly. That's where tension builds inside the chamber, because supporting spending cuts in general is very different from voting on specific reductions with visible consequences. And at that level, the debate moves beyond a single proposal. It becomes a test of whether lawmakers apply the same standard across all spending decisions, or whether support for fiscal restraint changes depending on pressure and circumstance. That's why this moment stands out, not because of the dollar amount alone, but because it exposes the gap between what is said in principle and what is actually supported when governing decisions become real.